Hello, my name is Steven Loera, and this is my presentation on classroom management, where I've synthesized 3 resources and offer my own approach. So the first article I looked at was A Self-Regulatory Approach to Classroom Management, Empowering Students and Teachers by Kay Alderman and Susan McDonald. And essentially, the authors discuss the development of motivation as a driver in classroom management. So what they mean by this is that they offer that self-regulated learning approaches have been applied to a diverse range of academic disciplines, math, science, study skills, but they haven't really applied this to classroom management. And the authors argue that this self-regulated learning approach can be directed towards social behaviors when managing a classroom, and if done so effectively, really helps with classroom management. The authors go on to argue that when autonomy is given to the students from the teacher, that increases their sense of competence in whatever discipline they may be in. The authors go on to explain that in order to maintain a positive classroom environment, that requires social, personal, and behavioral elements to increase that positive classroom management. And overall, they just emphasize providing a structure in the classroom. And they're very explicit. They say that that structure will depend on your classroom. And I have noticed that even as a new teacher, my first 2 months, the dynamic in first and second period is completely flipped third and fourth. So what I can do in one class, I'm still developing in another class. So our lessons, while similar, are not always the same. I have to modify them for my classes accordingly. There are some classes who are mature enough to handle gallery walks, for example, third and fourth period. I have to guide them a little more and provide more structure in order to get what I want out of the lesson. The next article that I read was a comparative study of elementary teachers' beliefs and strategies on classroom and behavior management in the USA and Korean school systems. This article I pulled out because there was a group of teachers who came from Mexico to my school, and they provided insight, and our principal sent us over just some talking points that they discussed that they had seen in our schools and that they don't do in theirs, and vice versa. I also have a student who's here from Nicaragua, and he's always making comparisons to his education as opposed to what he's receiving now at my school. At the end of this study concluded, the conclusion was that the beliefs were similar in terms of instructional management styles. Differences arose in student management styles. That is to say that Korean teachers emphasize more of a teacher-directed instruction, whereas U.S. teachers were more student-focused. On the other side, though, U.S. teachers encountered more behavior problems, and this was interesting. When I'm looking at the reinforcements, Korean teachers favored more negative reinforcement, while U.S. teachers favored more positive reinforcement for behaviors. This was a little bit hard for me to understand. I'm not sure why exactly the U.S. teachers encountered more problems, and I'm not sure if it leads to the type of reinforcement being offered by both teachers. In terms of instructional management styles, it was assigning seats, setting time limits, for example. Back to positive reinforcement on the U.S. side, they included praise and token economy, for example, and establishing and building positive relationships, whereas their Korean counterparts, type of enforcement was conferences, cooling down period, and peer problem solving. This is, I just think back to my student from Nicaragua, and excuse me, and when we take notes, for example, I do them on a PowerPoint. I provide pictorials. as a classroom, I sit them on the floor even, and for example, we're doing the 13 colonies right now. I drove them out, New England, Central, and Southern colonies, and then I discuss their economies, and we're doing this together, and I'm guiding them. And at the end of class, he tells me, Mr. Loda, why are we doing this? Why don't you just give us notes? Why don't you just talk to us about it, and we can take notes on our own? This is a 13-year-old. So he's still grappling with the way we teach here. So I found that interesting, and I found this article interesting because I'm seeing this in one of my students. And the last article I chose was Classroom Management and Student Self-Esteem, Creating Positive Classrooms. And I chose this article, it stood out to me because I'm teaching middle school, and everyone's told me that middle school students are very, very dramatic. They're going through changes in their body, and as such, any little thing might trigger them. And this has been the case in my instance. I've had countless students come up to me and, I don't want to sit there anymore because I'm mad at her. And I'm thinking to myself, yesterday you two were best friends. What's going on now? In any case, the article pretty much reinforces the idea that middle school students experience substantial changes emotionally, and management, the way I conduct it, will affect the student. So if I'm negative, the students will understand that, receive that, and maybe act out. And perception is critical. Adequate classroom management, for example, will increase levels of self-esteem, and better classroom management will increase them even further. So a study that they quoted by Nelson articulated that classroom management practices of teachers have a direct effect on student behavior, student motivation, and their self-esteem. Effective classroom management not only utilize effective learning environment, it really promotes self-esteem on the student's part. So in their concluding remarks, they mentioned that teachers who lacked in classroom management styles really had a difficult time with their overall classroom control. Not only that, but as a result, most of the instructional time was spent on classroom management. So to help teachers with classroom management, the article articulates that schools should provide training and professional development on classroom management, so they can be efficient in utilizing classroom time versus focusing on classroom management. So when I'm thinking about my own classroom management, at least since the beginning of the school year, this is kind of the best picture I found out. I was initially concerned with students getting up. They're walking around, they're talking. When are you going to sharpen your pencil? When can you not? And it's really a matter of developing my classroom management, setting expectations, modeling the behavior that I want students to repeat, imitate. But I can't help but get overwhelmed sometimes. Most of my classes have been great. There's just a few students and a few classes that kind of ruffle my feathers sometimes. So I think it's a matter of just continuing to build on positive relationships, getting students to respect me as a teacher, and moving forward from there. So my approach, respected, not necessarily liked. What I mean by that is that I want students to first respect me as their teacher. I do want them to like me because it makes things a lot easier. We're going to be together for 185 days. But if you're not respected, then they don't respect what you're teaching. That's how I feel. A structured process for everything. So when, like I said previously, when you get up and sharpen your pencil, when you can move seats, things of that nature. And one thing that I'm learning is to not speak over students. I'm starting to use nonverbal cues and verbal cues. One nonverbal cue is I just stand there and I stare at the clock. Another verbal cue that I use, signal words. So I'll say hot flaming, and the students yell out Cheetos. They love that. Involving parents. When there's a behavior issue, if it gets to that point, then I just send a quick email or just a quick update. On the other side, though, when students behave appropriately and when they're listening and on task, I also call parents and email parents just to let them know that, thank you. And then last thing is, I never get angry. I get upset. So I'll say, that's disappointing, or I'm upset that you made that decision. And that kind of hits a chord with them sometimes, especially if they're starting to respect and like you. And lastly, here are my resources. Thank you very much, everybody.